Welcome to another episode of the Supply Chain Lab. I'm your host, Maluleke, and today we're exploring a topic that's at the heart of building resilient, innovative supply chains, public-private partnerships, or PPPs. These partnerships are increasingly critical as businesses and governments alike navigate complex supply chain challenges and seek sustainable solutions. To unpack this topic, I'm thrilled to have with me Prof. Maluleke, an expert in PPPs with extensive experience in facilitating collaboration between public and private sectors. Today, he'll share his insights on how partnerships work, their potential to transform industries, and why they're so important for the future of global supply chain, particularly in Africa. Let's dive in and explore the power of collaboration in supply chains. Let's get started. Prof. Maluleke, before we dive into today's topic, firstly, I want to thank you for making time to come sit with us today. Could you just share a little bit about your journey, how you ended up in supply chain, and what inspired you to get involved in the world of PPPs?
Thank you very much, Shluke. Let me put it this way. For me to be involved in PPP, it has a history in it, and I'm actually going to unfold that history. Mm-hmm. Now, in terms of what is actually happening, for the benefit of my audience, I am a transportation economist by profession. And I have studied this from University of South Africa. I got my honors at the University of South Africa, and I did my master's here. Ondernemengsbestuur. That was business management, and my area of specialization was much more on strategic management. So thereafter, I actually studied transport economics at doctoral level. It was a matter of getting much more theory on what transport economics is all about. And having studied transport economics, I developed interest in transport infrastructure. And that transport infrastructure made me to believe that one has to explore much more about the current situations as well as where are we going as transportation economists. So it actually happened that during my time when I was still with Transnet, because I started working for Transnet way back in 1971, and I actually worked there gathering a lot of practical experience in the rail transport industry. And that was then coupled with what I studied when I was doing transportation economics. The theory that I actually had helped me to sort of understand the combination of technical knowledge as well as theoretical knowledge, made me to be more curious about what is actually happening in the transportation infrastructure industry. So this is what drove me to sort of try to find out about PPP, which is public-private partnership. Now, having said that, it was in 1997 when I started looking for more opportunities outside Transnet. And during that very same time, government was introducing a lot of initiatives in PPP. Now, these PPPs that I'm talking about, we are talking here about SDI, Spatial Development Initiatives. These are the strategies that were introduced by the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, which aimed at developing infrastructure at areas that are depressed. So I'll actually make mention of few of them, so that you can actually get a picture of what I'm talking about. We have what we call a Gauteng-Maputo Development Corridor. That was a PPP project that was introduced then, And then we had another one that is N3 route from Heidelberg to Sidara in KwaZulu-Natal. That was another PPP. Now with this PPP that I'm actually talking about, the Gauteng Maputo corridor, it took off in 1997. Now, taking off in 1997, thereafter, in 1998, we then tendered for a project called N3 toll concession route. And I was still working for Transnet by then. But then I had to take a strategic decision to say, do I tender while working for Transnet? And I actually thought that it was not going to be the right thing to work for a consortium while at the same time working for Transnet. So I resigned from Transnet. And by the time I resigned, I had already formed a company called Infra Africa Investment Holdings, Pty Limited. So that company was actually used to form a consortium with other South African companies, which are very, very strong. And I'm talking here about Murray and Roberts, as well as Greenacre. Those were the consortium members that formed N3 toll concession company that managed a road corridor from Heidelberg to Sidara in KZN. Now, I'm actually now responding to your question. How did you develop interest in this? Remember, I am a new person, having worked for 27 years for the railways, and now I am on my own in the private sector. And now this made me to be more curious about what is actually happening here. And now I am actually a shareholder and then a director of N3 toll concession. Being a director, you are actually sitting on the board of a very big company, big in terms of turnover and all those things. Now, having said that, it is a matter of making sure that you are productive at both levels. Now, this made me to be more interested in studying what we call public-private partnership. And fortunately enough, this was part of my doctorate. I was actually, exploring much more information about PPP. And the only information that I could get was from the World Bank. Why? Because the World Bank was championing this PPPs globally, and I had to get a lot of information from the World Bank. And we had what we called Project Information Memorandum, which was actually helping us to sort of understand how PPPs are actually unfolding. Now, this is very important. Now I have to sort of explain what this PPP is all about. Now we are talking about PPP. Public, meaning government. Private, meaning the private sector out there. And then partnership, this is a partnership which is not that ordinary partnership that we know, or company partnership or whatever. It is a strategic partnership which is there to last for many years. In South Africa, the minimum period starts from 15 years up to 30 years. And now that partnership that we are talking about, we need to make sure that there is honesty in this partnership. We need to make sure that the partners are interacting, transparently. They have to adopt the transparency, what you call value, to say, let's make sure that we are open to each other. Now, having said that, it is a matter of saying what is it that is used to coordinate this relationship. We have what we call a concession agreement. And this is very important to note. A concession agreement is drafted in order to make sure that the parties involved in this partnership are doing things that are documented there. And I'm saying this because when you talk about PPP, a lay person outside there will actually think of being given a very big project, given something that is just given to him without any compliance. So the concession contract is there to make sure that you comply with all the requirements that are actually needed to keep this partnership intact.
And you mentioned that it's usually 10 to 15 years. So after the period, or 10 to 30 years, after that period has passed, who then takes it over? How does it then continue to run?
It is a very good question. Let me answer that. Let's say, let me give a practical example with the Gautrain. It is a PPP. Now, being a PPP, initially I was their technical advisor, by the way. Initially, when it started, we actually looked at 15 years as a concession period. But somewhere they have that latitude of flexibility to make sure that it is extended. So they have extended that, but at the same time, it is a matter of saying when it expires, what happens. Now, what is happening is when it expires, you as a concessionaire, you must transfer the assets back to government. Now, when I say transferring the assets back to government, with regard to the Gautrain, we have Bombela running all these trains. Now, after a concession period, it is a matter of saying, let's transfer this asset back to government, meaning to the Gautrain Management Agency. They must actually get these assets back. But then what happens to you as a concessionaire? It is a matter of bidding again, because when the the time expires, you are actually required to bid like anybody else. So that you sort of, let's say you have performed well during your time as a concessionaire. They will actually look at all those things because they do have the output specifications to say you have performed well in BEE, for example. You have actually employed BEEs, you have created opportunities for your BEEs, and some are big business, enterprises. And by so doing, you are actually adding value. And they will then say, let's consider perhaps taking this concession back to you. But it is not a matter of doing it abruptly. It is a process. And that is where supply chain management kicks in. Because when we talk about supply chain, let us look at supply chain when we take it traditionally.
So just to go, before we get into the supply chain, just to make sure that I understand what you're saying.
Yes.
So you're saying when a PPP exists,
Yeah.
it will always run as a PPP. So government will always look for a private partner to manage or maintain that particular infrastructure, or that particular, like you gave the example of Gautrain.
Yeah.
So with Gautrain will always exist as a PPP, where government will always look for private partnerships in order for it to continue running.
Yeah. Let me explain that. You see, when they award a concession to you as a PPP, it is a matter of saying you have competed for the market. I think you have to take note of this because in economics, we have competition for the market, and we have also competition in the market. So this time, when talking about PPP, you are competing for the market. You are given the opportunity to say, this is the platform that you have to utilize. And after getting in, you have all the right to do all the developments. We actually allow you to take all the initiatives. Why? Because it is output-based. When you deal with output-based specifications, you are not restricted to something which is narrow there. You are given, a larger platform to operate and making sure that you come with your own initiatives. And that is why we encourage technology to kick in, so that whoever is quite equipped with technology, that enterprise will actually benefit a lot. And it is not a one-man show. It is a matter of getting a consortium of companies which should actually comply in terms of socio-economic development. And when talking about socio-economic development, the area where you are doing business, the society should actually benefit. Exactly.
Okay.
Sure.
Now back to your point on with regards to the importance of PPP within the supply chain. Can you just take us through what role PPPs play in terms of supply chain, and also why is it relevant in today's economic climate in South Africa and in Africa as a whole?
In fact, let me put it this way. When you talk about PPP and talking about supply chain on the other hand, I want this to be understood very well. When you talk about supply chain, you are actually saying, how do I procure the goods and services? Do I do it traditionally as usual, where you sort of say, request for pre-qualifications, request for bids and whatever? Are you doing it that way? That is the traditional way. But when you do it looking at the fact that this is a public-private partnership, this is a major project. We talk about mega project. And let me give perhaps an example of what is being proposed currently of a rail project from Gauteng to Polokwane. I'm just mentioning this so that you can actually understand where supply chain kicks in. And now they are busy working on that. It is a matter of conceptualizing the project. And when you conceptualize the project, you are making people aware that there is a need to have this type of service. And it does not mean that automatically it will actually materialize. It needs a lot of hard work. And when I say it needs a lot of hard work, a PPP approach, which is, a methodology where you engage key stakeholders, such as making sure that before you can even talk to anybody else, you sort of sensitize the political environment. And when I say sensitizing the political environment, you know for the fact that if you can't, satisfy the politics of this country, you will not actually take off the ground. Now, when I say sensitizing the political environment, I'm actually trying to say make sure that there is what we call political will to get into this project. Now, political will actually mean that we have consensus among political parties. There is no one who is actually saying, I'm better than this. They should actually look at a project, without any barriers or whatever. They must actually have that common vision of saying, we want to develop South Africa. So that is what we call political will. And now, having that political will, you are then going to say, can we get a champion who will act as a public participation expert?
So who identifies the need, Prof? Who identifies the need for the project? Is it the private sector or the public sector or both or either or?
That is a very good question. Thank you for that question. Let's say you are in Polokwane, for example, and you see the problems that are actually giving you a hard time and all those things. You do have the right to sort of say, I have this. And now it is a matter of initiating that project, making sure that you get the right people who will actually channel it to the right department. And I'm saying this, let me give you a practical example. When we initiated the Gautrain, it was not initiated by government, it was initiated by individuals who were actually looking at what is happening, looking at the traffic congestion from Pretoria to Johannesburg. And it was a matter of saying, if we can't do something, it is going to be a problem. Now, we actually started as individuals, but I started there together with my colleagues who were actually owning a company called Kutele. I was the co-owner of that company. Now, it was a matter of saying, let's approach Gauteng Department of Roads and Transport and make a presentation to sort of highlight what we have actually discovered. So the presentation was made to Gauteng Department of Roads and Transport, and our presentation was well received. After being well received, it was a matter of saying this should actually get more weight. Remember, this initiative is not happening in a vacuum. We have municipalities there. You know, municipalities, Ekurhuleni, we have Joburg municipality, we have the city of Tshwane municipalities. Those stakeholders were brought together. And that period, we call it, we were conceptualizing a project, project conceptualization. So you can conceptualize a project as Shihluke Maluleke. And then after conceptualizing it, make sure that it is getting to the right line department which is dealing with that. So meaning that at this point in time, you are not limited to the Gautrain. Look at any major project that can save life. And you will actually say, this is the concept that I have, and you channel it to the right department that will actually be conceptualized. And after being conceptualized, the group that will be running it, that will be an interim advisory, transactional advisory team. And that interim transactional advisory team will then push it to an extent that when considering issues such as pre-feasibility analysis, that team will actually work on that until the line department responsible takes, over. Then it is a matter of making sure that we work it out that way.
So, Prof, I just want to understand, how then do we get our transport sector to kind of work together? Because it currently feels like there's many initiatives that are being run. We have the Gautrain, then obviously you have the normal metro rail network, and these two are not linked. They kind of exist separately. How then do you think as a country we can kind of find some kind of collaboration within our transport sector to just improve our modes of transport, or how integrated our modes of transport are, and what role then does PPP play in this?
In fact, this is a very good question. Let me perhaps say, for your information, we have what we call legislative frameworks. And in South Africa, we have what we call National Land Transport Strategic Framework. That is a document that transformed our transport system from the old dispensation. Now, this National Land Transport Strategic Framework is actually giving a national framework to say, how are you supposed to do your planning? Because without planning, then you'll be doing a lot of work, and your work will not actually carry any benefits. You'll be doing a lot of work, and somewhere you'll be tired, and no benefits that can actually be tangible and say, I've done this. So this National Land Transport Strategic Framework that I'm talking about, it is giving an overarching framework that says all provinces in South Africa need to have what we call provincial land transport frameworks. Now, these provincial land transport frameworks will actually guide municipalities, because remember, provinces are not acting alone. For one to have transport running down there, you need municipalities to run the transportation systems. Now, having said that, your provincial land transport framework will actually say we need to have integrated transport plans at each municipality. Now, these integrated transport plans that I'm talking about, they are giving some guidance on how to coordinate your transportation system. And let me mention one integrated transport plan which is quite ideal for this coordination that I'm talking about. A comprehensive integrated transport plan, which is actually meant for metros like the city of Joburg, as well as Ekurhuleni, the city of Tshwane. Remember, we have very complex, transportation systems. You have your airports there. You have to make sure that there is public transport getting to your airports and all those things. So all these things are actually documented. And now, what is very, very key is that, these ITPs that I'm talking about, integrated transport plans, they must be reviewed every year. They must be reviewed, and after the 5th year, they must actually do what we call overhaul, meaning that they must actually do your transport register. They must actually, make sure that everything is documented. They count all those taxis that are departing from taxi ranks, all those buses that are actually moving, all those trains that are actually, and how full are these trains? The frequency of these trains, are they intact, and all those things. So by getting all this information and coordinating that as a province, it will actually help us to benchmark ourselves against Cape Town, for example. How is Cape Town performing? And then we then say, let's look at how these things are being coordinated. And your strategic land transport strategic framework is actually there to sort of being updated as well. We actually look at all these things to see, are they really achieving what should actually be achieved. Now, we come to the issue of PPP. PPP is not just a normal project. It is a very unique mega project to say we are proposing to have a project which will actually last for 30 years. And for that to happen, we have to start somewhere. We have to start somewhere, and when talking about Gauteng to Polokwane, you cannot just dream and say tomorrow I'm starting a project. It is getting to Polokwane. No, you have to say Gauteng province, where are we cutting now our boundary? Is it Pinas Refir? And if that is the case, meaning that Gauteng will actually be responsible for Pretoria to Pinas Refir. And now if we have Limpopo, it will be a matter of saying, but we cannot take Pinas Refir to Polokwane, once. We need to sort of make that distance, which is reasonable for a period of 15 years maybe, to perform. So maybe it will be from Pinas Refir to Polokwane, or from Hammanskraal to Bilabila, and whatever the case may be. So that planning is actually needed. And once you have that planning, in place, you will actually see how things will be feasible. That is why we talk about conducting a feasibility analysis. So that feasibility analysis will actually give you much information whether the project will be feasible in terms of physical performance, in terms of economic viability, in terms of legal issues. But the first thing is political will is actually the main issue.
And so what do you think are some of the challenges that are stopping this integration from happening? What are some of the challenges? What opportunities do you know of? And how do you foresee PPPs existing within the transportation sector in the future?
You see, when we talk about PPP, people have some misconceptions. And I think as a university, you have a very big role to play. When people are not informed, they take any decision. When people are not informed, they come with their own interpretation of things. And they will actually say, you see, so-and-so is now in power. He is coming with these funny things. And they are not actually going to look at the country as a whole to say, are we going to? So they will actually they will personalize things. And only to find that now they are influencing the larger public to say, this is actually wrong. And people will actually tend to believe that because there is no any intervention. And that is where I think universities are very critical to sort of get this information about PPP to show the real issues that PPP can actually bring. And when I say the real issues that PPP can actually bring, in terms of supply chain, in PPP, we make sure that the whole issue of procurement, it can take up to 2 to 3 years dealing with the procurement side of things. And when I said dealing with the procurement side of things, that is where we make output specifications. We need multidisciplinary companies that will dig, that will lay a railway line from here to Polokwane, but it cannot actually be done within 15 years. Let's demarcate this, and then in this, railway, outline, we need to make sure that some of the horizontal alignments are passing through mountains. How are we going to do the tunneling? And I'm saying this because For a traditional way of dealing with things, you will not actually solicit the expertise of foreign companies. They will actually say, why do we solicit foreign companies? Because we can actually do it here. But when coming to tunneling, we have tunneling experts from other countries, and you need to actually consider that. And when I I talk about PPP, it will be a matter of making sure that all the procedures are documented in a PPP, what you call approach, which complies with the supply chain management principles of PPP when procuring service for PPP.
So if I understand you correctly, some of the challenges are obviously maybe some private players and some public players self-serving and pushing projects that are not for the larger society, but just specifically to benefit a particular area or a particular group of people or a particular idea. And this is where you see most of the challenges in why we lack some of the collaboration and integration within the transport and supply chain sector.
In fact, let me put it this way. We have national guidelines documented by National Treasury. And those guidelines are actually guarding against issues of self-enrichment and whatever. So when you sort of prepare your documentations, you have what we call Treasury Authorization 1, where you go and prepare and making sure that you comply with all what is documented there. And then it is submitted. And then after submitting it, they will actually scrutinize that. And let's say, for example, you say, I have a credible BEE component in this project. And when, when assessing your submission, only to find that you have actually packaged a lot of people who are not even knowledgeable about the project that you are tendering for. Then it then becomes a very, very big problem. So that is being monitored. And with PPP projects, after being awarded the project, it is not the end of the story. We have what we call independent certifier. That is a company that is appointed to make sure that the relationship between the parties are intact. And let's say you said now you actually got the job because your BEE component was okay. They are going to look at the performance of this BEE. Are they coming with tangible outputs so that you sort of get your points according to your submission, making sure that you have actually scored everything according to what you have submitted.
Okay. So it is quite well regulated in terms of.
Very, yes.
And do you have any examples apart from the Gautrain of successful PPPs? Not necessarily, it doesn't have to be in South Africa, but across Africa or globally anywhere else. And what do you believe made these PPPs quite successful?
In fact, the second one, I'll actually talk about the N3 toll concession. Well, you will actually say, why do you talk about it? I am a shareholder there. I am a non-executive director. And we have actually managed this from 1998 till now. We are actually doing well. And I will say it is one of those PPPs that I'm proud of to say this is something that we have actually done well. Apart from the South African situation, I mean, during my studies when I was doing my PhD, I read a lot about coffee route in Canada. So it is a well-managed PPP. And the whole issue of electronic tolling and all those things, it actually worked very well. It's a pity that in Gauteng, electronic tolling in Gauteng was not well received. And that is exactly what I alluded to say. We need to educate our people to understand what PPP is all about, so that by the time we initiate other projects, they will actually know exactly, what is actually happening. Yes.
And how would you say the goals of the government and the private sector need to be more aligned to ensure that there isn't conflict in PPPs?
You see, remember, government is there to render, to make sure that the service is right, not necessarily getting profit, but efficiency. The government is there to enhance efficiency. When we have efficiency gain, that is what government is actually trying to get. But at the same time, with regard to the private sector, they must put more effort on efficiency and effectiveness. Now, effectiveness is those things that they are doing right, they must do them the right way. So, meaning that when they are efficient, they will be saving costs, they will be optimizing the service, and the effectiveness thereof will actually be, they will be making a profit. So they must make sure that they focus on the common vision with government, and for them to perform well, it will actually give them that favorable difference between what they have inserted and the outcome.
And what would you say are some of the key and critical things to ensure that a PPP is successful?
The very same issues that I talked about, to say, when you have a PPP project, make sure that you keep the public informed. Public consultation, participation. You must actually employ an expert in public participation. And once the people are informed, they know about what is happening, and they know about their right to safety is secured, their right to be informed is okay, their right to choose is guaranteed. They will not actually give you that much problem. And the reason why we are getting problems is that people are skeptical about what is happening. They are not sure of whatever happens, whether it will actually be done the right way. They will always talk about corruption. They do not actually see our government being, the right government to lead. So we have to remove that stigma. And once again, we need to educate people about this. People need to know about what these PPPs are all about. And once they know, they will we need to disseminate the same information to the broader public so that they can take rational decisions.
And support the project instead of
exactly
being against it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. So I just want to ask you about sustainability, because it's becoming quite important now globally. How do you believe PPP can support the South African government in becoming more sustainable? What kind of initiatives do you think we might see in the future to support and enhance sustainability?
In fact, coming to the issue of sustainability.
Prof, you don't want
Sorry,
to take some?
let me take water.
Yeah.
You see. Yeah, no, that's good. How much time do we have?
We have almost 10 more minutes. 10 more minutes.
Sure.
Time flies.
Time flies. Let me put it this way. We have Environmental Management Act, which is in place for any PPP project that you undertake. You need to comply with that. And then you need to actually get a record of decision. So that is documented. But we need to go beyond that. And when I say we need to go beyond that, I'm looking at things that can sustain our environment, can actually make it possible for us to deliver sustainable, what you call, projects. Let me put it this way. Currently, we have all these electric cars being proposed. And other countries are already running that. We have Egypt running a very, very powerful, what you call, everything is going green. Let's minimize air pollution, because once we have a lot of air pollution, we will actually, get asthma and all those complexities. So meaning that South Africa, let's all wake up and make sure that electric cars that they are proposing abroad, we sort of buy into this. And this will not just come as an operational project. It will actually work as a PPP. Let me give a practical example. Let's say our concept of Gauteng to Polokwane is actually taking off the ground. Now you can actually form what we call a vertical integration strategy. Now vertical integration strategy meaning that your rail project should actually have distribution points, making sure that those distribution points are also electrified. And by so doing, we are going to minimize air pollution. This carbon monoxide emission is actually going to be minimized. And by so doing, we are actually encouraging that sustainability that we are actually trying to achieve at the end.
Okay, I think that's quite interesting. So I think just to close off, maybe you can leave us with some emerging trends or technologies that you believe the next generation of people that want to get into PPPs or companies that want to get into PPPs should look out for.
What I'm actually seeing happening currently, we have all these projects that are being proposed. Electric cars, we should actually make sure that we have stations that are charging these batteries of electric cars. And by so doing, we will be, adding value to the transport corridor. Let's say the Polokwane corridor is actually working, and then we are now having that electric train moving. So it is a matter of taking more passengers from the road network, getting into your train. But those who are still using the highway will actually use electric cars and making sure that we minimize carbon monoxide emission. And by so doing, we are actually working towards sustainability. And not only that, we need to encourage the Department of Agriculture, for example, to say, let's green the economy. Let's make sure that we plant, avocados and whatever, so that these trees will actually absorb carbon monoxide. And by so doing, we are balancing, the environment.
And what advice would you give business or government bodies looking to form successful PPPs?
It is a matter of making sure that they align themselves with what is documented at national, treasury, national treasury guidelines. Those are the documents to consult, and then they have to make sure that people who are ready can bid for PPPs, they must get education. And I think universities, you are there to produce knowledge. I mean, that is your main job, to produce knowledge and disseminate that knowledge. And I think you can actually do well. More so that, UJ has been there in the transportation environment. And I think you can actually do much more research to say, how can we package our, curriculum so that we sort of intervene and make sure that we address this whole issue of PPPs.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof. Do you have any other final words that you think are quite critical that we didn't get a chance to touch on in this conversation that you think are important to impart before us closing our conversation?
I think this is not the end of the story. I would like to share with you much more things that are actually happening outside. And why I'm saying this, we need to interact and making sure that on the practical side of things, you sort of, address those issues as academic institutions. Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Prof. It was great to have you. We will definitely call you back soon. Thank you for taking time to sit with us.
Good.
And we'll chat soon.
Sure. Good.